So I'll wait a minute for the slides. We were talking this morning about the past and the present, and I'm sure you were wondering about the future. So we'll talk about the future today. Jyothi was talking about her path, and I'm sure you were wishing she had instead been talking about her dissertation, you know, with the equations in it and stuff like that. So we'll talk about her dissertation, and it turns out her dissertation is the future, and so the two things are the same. This is a joint work that we did with Fabrizio Sebastiani at the National Research Council of Italy. Next slide, please. Oh, where do I get the, there we go. The next slide, please, business. We got to get one of those automated things that reads my voice. Okay, so what I want to start by talking about is the goals and approaches, and then Jyothi's going to talk about all the fun stuff in the middle, and then I'll talk about the consequences for the law. So, as we talked about before, the goals of document review and e-discovery. Now, this is not the goals of e-discovery, right? Goals of e-discovery to find evidence. Goals of document review are to review documents as a part of that process. So we're that one little box in the middle, right? Goals of document review and e-discovery are to provide a reasonable process to identify relevant documents. Among the relevant documents, identify the privileged documents, and then to produce the documents that are relevant and non-privileged, right? Those are our goals, and we want to keep those in mind. But those are not my goals for today. My goals for today are to change the definition of reasonable, right? That's what technologists can do, and that's what I tried to set up this morning. So this was the first of the approaches. This was the lawyer in the box, the old style approach, which we called exhaustive manual review. You might call it exhausting manual review, but you simply look at everything. Here we have some machine that will do the review. Now we're going to call this fully automatic review. But it's not fully automatic review because there's a lawyer guiding the machine. But we're not going to focus on the lawyer's guiding of the machine. We're just going to say somehow the machine got built, and after the machine got built, the lawyer can go on vacation, and the machine will then do the review, right? So that's the idea of technology-assisted review. So we build a machine that can help with the review, and then the machine will perform the review. Now, nobody in their right minds would trust a machine to do the review without looking at what comes out, and so it's traditional for people to look at the documents that come out before they're turned over. Now, what we want to claim the future holds is a future in which we do exactly this, but it might not be good enough. You might have had an experience at some point in your life where some machine screwed up. Now, we know it's not the machine that's screwing up, it's the programmer that's screwing up, right? So somebody has done something that didn't quite work right. And so you want to look at the output and you want to make decisions about how to correct the machine's mistakes. And so the thing we want to talk about today is not this. This part we talked about in the morning. What we want to talk about is this. And the question is, which documents should you review? And the obvious answer is all of them, because any of them will get you in trouble. And we run cases far too large for that. You're just not going to be able to do that in every case. So we're going to have some way of prioritizing the documents for review. And how will we do that? Well, there are two basic possibilities. You could say, well, I don't know, I think that document's worth looking at. Or you could ask the machine, hey, which documents do you think you might have screwed up on? That'll be Jyothi.
Okay, thanks, Doug. So what I'll be talking about in the next few slides is what do we do here? How do we rank the document based on risk? So how do you define risk? So right now we have two systems. Let's assume we already have two systems. One is going to tell us what is the probability that a particular document is relevant. We already have this system ready. we tell all these documents are relevant out of the entire population, and the documents that are in yellow are not relevant. And the system has already given that. And the same way, the ones in green are not privileged, and the documents that belong in the box AP that is in red is going to be privileged. So you all can know that we can actually have a particular divider like this, which is called a contingency matrix by most information retrieval scientists, that those documents which are relevant and privileged, you actually produce them. The documents that are relevant you produce all the documents that are relevant and not privileged. The documents that are relevant and privileged, you actually enter them in the privilege log and you withhold them, right? You just enter them in the privilege log and not produce it. But the documents that are not relevant, you actually withhold it. And this is the system's decision and what happens when the truth comes in. When the truth comes in, this is the set you actually need to produce in reality. This is the thing you actually need to put it on the privilege log, and that's the truth, because we have, let's say, God telling us that that is the truth, and we have the not relevant documents, and that is what you should have actually withheld. But now you have, these are the mistakes. The mistakes is the ones which are not in these diagonals. These are, okay, the mistakes are all with numbers. Can you actually put a number to a mistake? And I think I'm asking the wrong question, because lawyers just cannot think in numbers. And that's the biggest problem here. You just cannot tell me, if I show you a document and I tell you that if I give it away and it's a mistake, will you lose a finger or will you lose your head, right? It's not possible. And if at all, you can say everything is important, but our model is basically based on giving us a reasonable number. To tell us what is reasonable, we request all the lawyers to think of a reasonable number where you can tell me that a document which is relevant and privileged, if it is accidentally handed over, is the highest. We can understand in relative terms. We can think that this mistake, that kind of mistake, is the most expensive mistake. And the kind of mistake here, which is again relative, which is with respect to the documents which are not, actually they're not relevant, but you actually log them. Again, you're not giving away anything, you're just entering it on the privilege log, but it is actually not relevant at all. So that would not even matter if at all it's accidentally produced. So that has the least amount of value in it. So having that, and with what we have from the model here, this is just mere probabilities between 0 and 1. We can actually tell you what is the cost of a single mistake that the machine is going to get. So if the mistake is actually the lambda ij is actually coming from here, if it is relevant and privileged, and that's a mistake, that's going to be 600. And if you make 100 number of mistakes of that kind, let's assume this is the results of my model, and my model has done mistakes on 100 documents of type this one, which is like you will definitely lose the case. So this means that you are the cost, the risk of that particular document, which is 600, is you're costing a total of $60,000. So when do you actually do the manual review? So now you know what a risk is, and you need to know only to review those documents. Like, we want to make sure we are making the best use of time of the resources, that is the smart lawyers, right? So we need to draw the line somewhere and not let them review entire 1 million documents. The idea is to stop somewhere. And here we are trying to understand, where do you stop? So we rank by risk. We actually manually label only those documents which have a risk which is lesser than $1. And where does this $1 come from? By literature review, we have seen that most times, most lawyers would actually review 60 documents, in 1 hour when it comes to the relevance, right? And mostly relevance review is done by what you call as a junior attorneys, paralegals, usually. And that's why we get the number as it takes $1 to actually review one document for relevance. And similarly, we've seen that it takes $5 to review one document for privilege. So if the risk that is actually calculated per value, which is an expectation, which that's in the paper, so please do refer to that. If that is above $1, if it is lesser than $1, you actually review it. If the risk is greater than $1, you actually review the document. And if the risk is lesser than, for relevance review, which is lesser than $1, you do not. That is, once the risk is lesser, you do not review the documents below. You only review the ones which is in yellow here, that is M of NR, is a manual decision. You show it to the lawyer, and you actually save the money by not reviewing these, which is actually relevant. The one in AR, you're saving a lot of money there. And similarly, you do the same thing for privilege, and you save reviewing all the documents for A of NP and A of P, because you only review the documents which are not privileged, because the privileged ones, you actually think that the system is right and not review it. So finally produce the ones that are relevant and not privileged, and log the ones which are relevant and privileged. So we actually did this and we experimented this on a collection of close to 200,000 documents, and we actually compared it against many baselines. And these are the current technology, the way of ranking per relevance, according to using some kind of active learning techniques as well. And these were some of our baselines. And our results actually saved. So what you see in this table is the percentage of cost savings that our system, our ranking system, in US dollars, in thousands of US dollars, that we actually saved. So you can see that, so in the case 1, case 2, and case 3, are three numbers that we got for each of the cost matrices that I told you. Each of those cases, the 3 lawyers whom we worked with, they actually had their own mental image of what a cost would look like, and we got 3 different samples, and we actually show that our model actually does a significantly good job in saving money for the lawyers. And yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Jyothi. So the basic idea here is that we can tell you what is cost-effective to review and what's not cost-effective to review if you can tell us what the costs are. If you can't tell us what the costs are, we can't do anything for you. And I just can't imagine how many of you must have been talking about the costs of mistakes on the way in here. I'm suspecting it's 0, right? It's just not something that we presently have in our discourse. So here's the technology that can use the results of that discussion. And then the question for you is, can you think of the problem in that way? Or do we have to design the technology in some other way to match the ways in which you're thinking? So I think we've established that risk minimization, this idea of sorting things by risk, could change the definition of reasonable, but it hasn't changed the definition of reasonable yet. This paper was published last week. We make the assumption the automated system's already done its best, but of course it may be that it's possible still to make the automated system better. So in an academic study, we can make this assumption, but this is an assumption that should be tested. And then we use manual review, that's the people working for you, to make their review, make the results even better than the automated system can do. If you go into court and somebody says, well, you know, I think you've waived privilege here by being careless and turning over things that you now want to claim are privileged, then you could get in serious trouble. So at present, somebody reviews everything. But if the courts were to accept that this risk minimization were an appropriate way to balance the benefits of e-discovery with the costs of e-discovery, then we could review less, have lower cost for e-discovery, get greater societal benefits. So it's really a question for the law whether you want to do this. It acts in a really bizarre way because, as Jyothi said, some mistakes just aren't that consequential, and other mistakes are a really big deal. So there could be cases in which you might have made a mistake, but the mistake is such low cost it's not worth correcting. So that's a case where it's right to be wrong. Lawyers really ought to be able to talk about that one for a long time, right? Okay, so we get more cost effective by reviewing the mistakes that are both likely and costly. Some things you turn over won't be manually reviewed, either because automation got it right or because it's not so important. So you have to estimate those costs correctly, or this is a really bad idea. Thank you.